list a lot more stuff against Biden.
Then this Wall Street crony comes out last week and says he's not going to go after the billionaires. He's not going to make them angry. Wall Street loves this turkey.
Yeah. The second one he goes after, Pete Buttigieg can at least partially speak a lot of languages and would be a historic first gay president. But he has less experience than Bernie had in 1988. And those 7 years as mayor of Indiana's fourth biggest town have been problematic at best. Here are his top 5 highlights. Fired South Bend's black police chief for exposing racism in the police force, then lied about it, then fired those calling for an investigation, possibly leaving innocent black people imprisoned, while some in his inner circle backed a $45,000 loan to one of the accused racist cops. Refused to investigate the apparent lynching of a 16-year-old black boy. When a white police officer with a documented history of racist behavior that violated department policy was allowed to stay on the force without a body cam, he shot and killed an elderly black man. And Mayor Pete spoke to the media before the victim's family, skipped the vigil, and then gave a speech to the police instead. And he received a lot of criticism for that. Allowed a white officer to keep his job after multiple racist and violent incidents, including beating and tasing an innocent teen after breaking into the wrong house, and torturing a disabled man and posting a video of it online as retaliation for the man filing a complaint about the force ignoring a drunk driving incident, even despite a community-led campaign and petition. And finally, he oversaw increases in homelessness and displacement during his time as mayor of South Bend. Then they list a whole bunch of other things that he's done. Third is Kamala Harris would be the first female president who is also a corrupt cop. Here are her top 5 highlights. Pushed a law that forces schools to turn undocumented students over to ICE, separating them from their parents and violating human rights. Laughed about putting parents in jail if their kids missed school, disproportionately harming the poor, families of color, and single-parent households, including homeless mothers. Refused to address what the Supreme Court calls unconstitutionally overcrowded prisons so she could perpetuate the exploitation of the mass incarcerated for slave labor close to $1 an hour.
That ain't a progressive, folks.
Let me keep going. Declined to prosecute Steve Mnuchin after his bank's predatory lending and foreclosure fraud broke the law over 1,000 times and ruined the lives of thousands of homeowners, keeping him free to donate to her campaign and become Trump's Treasury Secretary. Last one, spent years jailing disproportionately black nonviolent cannabis users while opposing taking cannabis off the DEA's list of most dangerous substances, and literally laughing at the idea of legalizing it even as her Republican opponent ran to the left of her on the issue. She then tried to pander by admitting to smoking herself despite prosecuting others, but got her story all wrong and even offended her own Jamaican family to the point they've disassociated with her. Then they list even more after that. The final one, Robert Francis Beto O'Rourke. More likely to stand on something than for anything, Beto rose to fame by clearing the low bar of being less likable than Ted Cruz. Like most white men born into wealth, he's failed up, choosing a vanity run for president despite being best positioned to flip Texas' other Senate seat in 2020. He says he was born for it, but maybe he should have just stuck to skateboarding. Here's his top 5 highlights. Appropriates the Mexican nickname of Beto to pander and trick Hispanic voters. Used his political power to help his millionaire father-in-law gentrify poor Hispanic communities with a racist plan that relocated poor Hispanics to make way for property investments made by wealthy Republican donors. Opposed Obamacare, tried to cut Social Security, and attacked labor unions to appease Republican donors. Generally voted against Democrats so much he was in the top 5th of lawmakers voting against their own party, voting with Trump a third of the time, even though he represented one of the most solid blue districts in the country. And finally, ran the most expensive congressional race of all time with immense establishment and celebrity backing, and still lost to the guy who lost to Trump. And then they list even more after that.
Darren, this is Deja Vu 2016. when the Democratic Party ignored half of its base and rigged an election and handed you Donald Trump, and we're going down the same path right now. Common Dreams has an article. Damn right irresponsible and shameful. DNC and NBC are ripped for the Democratic debate. One of the things, besides the fact it was quietly an attack against Bernie Sanders, was the fact that they gave 3.5 minutes attention to the biggest global policy, and that was global warming, or that was the environment. Okay? That is damn irresponsible. But I want to go down a different road than the environment. Okay? Last night's Democratic primary debate had many questions posed. And in the most heated moments of questions, they irreversibly and consistently involved the candidate who was sitting next to Biden, Bernie Sanders. This is, in a matter of words here, a picture of the choreographed and systemic attack, subtle but nonetheless obvious attack against Bernie Sanders. The headline of this is Bernie Sanders' ideas dominate the second debate, The Atlantic. Really, it was a referendum last night on Bernie Sanders' platform. Everybody pretending they agreed with the majority of it, but then, as I'm going to read, slowly attacking him. In one of the first exchanges of the night, the moderator cited Sanders' affiliation with the Democratic Socialists of America, and therefore asked Colorado Governor John Hickenlooper whether the Democratic Party is veering towards socialism. Oh, that didn't come from Fox News. That came from MSNBC. Hickenlooper replied by criticizing two policy proposals that Sanders has famously championed. One, Medicare for All, which would usher in a government-run health care system. And then he mentioned the Green New Deal, the ambitious blueprint to combat climate change. The moderate Hickenlooper, who took heat early this year for declining to call himself a capitalist, called for the candidates to more clearly communicate that we, meaning the Democrats, are not socialist. That's punch number one, sucker punch. Kristen Gillibrand from New York, she added in too. She chimed in too, trying to assure viewers that the current debate within the party is not about socialism, but between capitalism on the one hand and greed on the other. Sucker punch number two. At that moment, by the way, Bernie leaned into the microphone and laughed, okay? I don't blame him. Several of the candidates seemed to define themselves against Sanders reflexively, comparing and contrasting their agenda with his. Like this. It was a reminder of just how popular the senator from Vermont's ideas have become since the first campaign in 2016. His policies have dominated discussion for the past 3 years, helping pry open the Democrats' Overton window inch by inch. That is a political fact. That's especially true when it comes to health care. When asked about the pragmatism of progressive proposals, Senator Michael Bennet, another pot shotter at Senator Sanders, Bennet of Colorado said, I agree with Bernie on his goal of universal health care. But, here comes the but I disagree on his solution of Medicare for All. Wait a second. Hold a second. Bennet, you agree with his goal of universal health care. So the way I'm going to undermine this is to say I disagree with the solution of Medicare for All. Okay, you don't have another solution except, some phase-in cockamamie private, hand it to private people like Harris proposes. Pete gets into the act. The mayor from Indiana you just read about. Petey Dink, he goes like this. He criticized when he seizes an impractical shift to Medicare for All system. His words were verbatim that Bernie's proposal was a impractical shift to Medicare for All. Every person in politics who allows that phrase to escape their lips has a responsibility to explain how you're supposed to get from here to there. That shadows the very first question, the very first salvo that went against Bernie, which was, how are you going to pay for your health care? They all jumped in, Darren. Every single one of them. Like a circular fight. When the subject turned to student debt, it didn't change. Then the candidates jabbed at Sanders' new proposal to cancel all American student debt to the tune of $1.6 trillion with no income or other restrictions. I believe in free college for those whom cost would be a barrier, Buttigieg said. I just don't believe it makes sense to ask working-class families to subsidize even the children of billionaires. Biden explained that he would want to give students tuition-free community college instead. The candidates over and over again were playing the game on Sanders' turf, attacking the guy who gave them the turf. My words. He didn't receive the Democratic Party nomination in 2016. He may not secure it in 2020. But when the issues he's long championed are being debated before 15 million Americans, in some ways, he should have already won. You had a blanket thrown over Bernie by the moderator in the structure of the debate, brought to you by MSN Corporate NBC, started with the first question, and then all the candidates took their jabs one at a time, to cut his policies, when they all then turned around and pretended they were for his policies, like Kamala, who raised her hand saying she was for universal health coverage. It was nauseating. It was absolutely sickening. And Common Dreams is correct in condemning the DNC and the NBC for another rigged debate. And if people missed it, that's just how deep you are in your deception. That's just how much Kool-Aid you drank. If you typed in on Facebook the morning saying, I could vote for any of those 10 Democrats. How many times you see that, Darren? I feel totally comfortable. I'd feel great. You know, Tom Hartman's saying right now, I'd be totally comfortable with any of those Democrats.
Yep. Absolutely you would. By the way, you can find that article. We've got a link to it on our official Facebook page. Go to facebook.com/Southpaws Radio Show. Again, it's the Atlantic. It's Elaine Godfrey is the author. She is an assistant editor at the Atlantic, and the headline is Bernie Sanders' Ideas Dominated the Second Debate. Please read that. It's very, very important.
Before we leave here, I'm not a gambling man, but if Vegas would have had things to bet on that will show up in this debate, do you think they would have said Kamala Harris, the only black woman up on the stage, might just pull the race issue? She did. You remember? She jumped in on, I can't remember who the moderator was. Anyway, she says, I want to speak about race. Well, blow me over. Hit me with a feather. I'm shocked.
Yeah.
Of course she pulled the race card. Now, she did it very tactfully, but the black woman made sure that you realize she's the black woman on the stage. I have nothing against black women. I have nothing against a black president. But this thing last night was completely scripted. It was as predictable as a GOP's remarks on what are you going to do when you get these things, Bernie? How are you going to pay for them? They all fell in line behind it. It was nauseating. It was
absolutely.
Everybody take a kick at Bernie, but
Yeah.
do it very disguised.
Yep.
Be clandestine about it.
Oh, exactly. And that's all it is. They're not even clandestine about it anymore. That's the thing. Anyway, speaking as we continue talking about this a little bit, this will get us right into our next segment, and in order to do that, we do need to play the appropriate music. Oh, boy.
Stop. Hammer time.
Yeah.
go,
We might
Chico.
as well get right into it early. It's hammer time. It's time to drop the hammer on the douchebag of the week, and we got 2 winners, which means that whenever we have 2, we have to play this as well.
Double douche.
Ladies and gentlemen, Wade Garrett. Exactly right. Yes, winner number 1 for Hammer Time this week is NBC reporter Casey Hunt. For this little exchange, this runs 1 minute, 11 seconds. Take a good listen to this hit piece.
If it's clear that you are not going to be the Democratic nominee, will you leave the race before the convention?
I intend to be the Democratic nominee.
But if you're not, you stated last time, and some people say that you hurt Hillary Clinton's candidacy.
Well, no, some people say that if maybe that system was not rigged against me, I would have won the nomination and defeated Donald Trump. That's what some people say. So I think we're going to play it out. I think I am excited.
And so you would take the risk
I
that
am
you
excited.
might give Donald Trump
Are you
an
asking
advantage?
that of every candidate?
I'm saying if it's clear that you are not going to win the nomination, will you concede?
Well, right now we are planning to win the Democratic nomination. And I'm proud of the campaigns we're running in Iowa and in New Hampshire, and I'm proud of our grassroots support and the fact that we have 1 million volunteers. So our goal right now is to win it. And by the way, as you may know, poll after poll shows what against Trump? shows me beating Trump by 8, 9, or 10 points. So we're going to beat Trump. We're going to win the Democratic nomination.
Are you a Democrat?
Of course I'm a Democrat. This is a Democratic National Convention. A Democrat